Back with you here on News at Prime. Mango's business rescue practitioner has revealed that the low-cost airline will be sold to an unnamed investor. The sale has been marred by controversy, with Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan reportedly demanding detailed information on the new owners before giving the green light. Let's discuss this with SA Fly magazine editor Leitch. Good to have you. Thank you very much for your time. The High Court in December dismissed the Public Enterprises Minister's request for permission to appeal the September 6th situation. But it seems, again, the Minister is still kind of dilly-dallying and not actually submitting anything of substance in as to why he's objecting to the sale of this airline. What do you think is actually going on here?
Yeah, hi, Thabo, and nice to be with you as always. Well, you know, on face value, it's inexplicable as to why the Minister continues to put a spoke in the wheel of this deal. This legal battle now from the business rescue practitioner Sono against the Department of Public Enterprises has been going on for over a year now. And there's no reason for this delay unless there is some nefarious, unseen, weird political agenda which might, I have to assume, go along the lines of, well, actually, we'll pretend that we're going to sell off state-owned airlines like SAA and, for that matter, here the remains of Mango. But we're not actually. We're just going to continue to block it. On SAA, you'll have no doubt noticed that the Takatso deal is still just not really progressing in any useful way. It's 3 years down the line and nothing much has actually happened. Still huge obstacles. And here we've seen this as the same thing. A delaying tactic, stalling tactics. Somebody might even call it a Stalingrad tactic to try and prevent just the remains of Mango being sold off to a private investor. Your introduction was a little bit incorrect, though. Actually, we do know who the buyer is.
Yes, I was coming to that. It's Ubuntu Air Services. I was looking at it and I'm thinking, but I thought we do know who the buyer is, because the minister had previously said, look, I want to see the business case of Ubuntu Air Services before making a decision.
Yes, and I mean, you know, ostensibly that's a reasonable reason, but it's not, because it's not up to the minister. The airline is defunct. The airline has got nothing left. It doesn't have any airplanes. It doesn't have any jobs. It doesn't have any routes. It doesn't even have its licenses anymore, its operating licenses, which are worth a lot. So, I mean, what is the minister actually trying to protect? Well, we can only assume that the minister is trying to protect SAA from yet another competitor. And that would be a tremendous pity that we're seeing SAA version 2 getting going, but it's going to be at the expense of other airlines and a loss of other jobs and a loss of connectivity. The country needs another low-cost carrier. I know that FlySAF Air and Lyft might not say so, but we did perfectly well with 3 or 4 low-cost carriers before COVID. Quite frankly, the tourists benefit. The airfares are cheap. Remember how cheap it was to get to Cape Town. It's great for tourism. It's great for the economy. It's just, quite frankly, unjustifiable for the minister to keep holding up the sale like this.
So NUMSA has come out to say, well, they believe maybe the minister has got an ulterior motive. Shall I dare ask, do you think the minister maybe has got another buyer in mind?
I think that if the minister had another buyer, he would have trotted it out with much pride and said, oh, well, look what I've got, okay? And to be honest with you, I'd be extremely skeptical if there's another buyer. In fact, I'm a little skeptical about Ubuntu as a group. Yes, they say that they've got 110 million rand in their bank accounts, and yes, they're going to pay 326 million rand in theory for the airline. But a lot of it is in offsets and other trade deals, and government has first to sell off a jet engine and pay off the debts for unflown ticket liabilities and so on. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in this whole thing. But quite frankly, the minister doesn't have a right, and that's been shown by the courts, to demand to see a detailed business plan before he sells off what's left of the airline. So it's just at this stage inexplicable, other than to find some ulterior political motive as to why he's delaying like this.
So the latest statement from the department saying that the business rescue practitioners are continuing to defy all requests for transparency and vital information on which proper due diligence can be done, saying, I suppose at this point, proper due diligence has not been done. Something similar to the Takatso deal, where again, said, no, proper due diligence needs to be done. And we hear that this airline was sold for close to nothing. Are we likely to end up with a similar type of deal here?
Well, yes and no. I mean, if the Takatso deal goes ahead, and it's a big if, then the Takatso consortium has to come up with 3 billion rand as operating capital that it's got to feed in to run the airline. And the airline that we're talking about, SAA, it is desperately in need of that capital. You know, it hasn't been recapitalized. And the big problem with SAA version 1 was that it was continuously short of capital because it wasn't putting away money for a rainy day, if you like. It wasn't investing in its balance sheet. But now SAA finds that it desperately needs a strong balance sheet because it's got to buy new airliners, aircraft. It's got to buy wide-body, expensive aircraft to fly to places like London and Europe and even Perth, and each one of these airliners costs around more than 5 billion rand. This is huge amounts of money, which it needs, and it's all signs of that it actually cannot get finance for these aircraft on its own balance sheet. So the Takatso deal needs to happen. But again, we're just seeing this endless delaying tactic from Minister Gordhan. You know, a lot of things could be done concurrently. They could all happen at the same time. You could apply for the license. You could apply to change the Act of Parliament. You could apply to the Commission. You could do all of those things at the same time, but no, they do them one after the other. So at this stage, we're told that they've repealed the Act of Parliament which creates SAA, but we haven't even seen a draft of a whole new act. And then it'll be the next thing, and then it'll be the Air Services Licensing Council. And the big question, by the way, remains, where on earth is the Takatso consortium going to find the 3 billion rand that it's promised to recapitalize the airline with? My view is that the Takatso deal is also probably going to be kicked down the road until it eventually just stops altogether.
Yeah. Are these things all being delayed and kicked down the road, I suppose, waiting the outcomes of the 2024 elections? Could we be in a situation where we are likely only going to see any movement on these after the elections?
You know, I think that there's a lot to be said for that, and I've got another little theory as well. I can't remember exactly when it is, but Pravin Gordhan's 75th birthday, if I'm not mistaken, is at the end of April. And I suspect that he's hanging on there until he retires because, you know, he's a good old socialist, if I can dare say, communist, central command and control kind of guy. And I think that the last thing he wants to see is 2 state assets, SAA and for the remains of Mango, being sold off on his own watch, as it were. And also, I mean, I think that the government has, there's a phrase out there doing the rounds, the government is to a certain extent gaslighting its electorate by pretending that it's doing things and showing that it's doing things in terms of changes in legislation, whether it's expropriation without compensation or whether it's the National Health Insurance or even major changes to the Employment Act. So they're going to say, oh, look what we've done. But actually, they're not going to implement any of those changes. So you're probably right. We're probably waiting until an election, and hopefully the logjam might get broken then.
Leitch, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on this evening. SA Fly Magazine editor Leitch there.